Welcome, everyone, to our first panel session of the EcoCareers Summit. My name is Courtney Cochran. I am the manager of youth leadership on NWF's education and engagement team, and I will be moderating today's career panel. Thank you all so much for joining. As the climate crisis continues to accelerate, so does the need for action across all sectors of the economy. Today, we are joined by a group of professionals working in different intersections with climate, from justice to security and education to adaptation. Each of these four panelists will share a bit of their personal and professional journeys, the work they do today, and their advice for young environmental leaders seeking to make a difference in this area of their work and their own career paths. After the panelists have all finished presenting, we'll jump into the Q&A section of the event. Please feel free to submit any questions you have as each panelist is presenting, and we will ask as many as we can at the conclusion of the panelists' presentations. So first, we will start off by introducing Noah Fritzhand. Noah is a research fellow at the Center for Climate and Security and Institute of the Council on Strategic Risks. At CCS, Noah works internationally, tackling policy questions on global food security, renewable energy, and climate misinformation. Prior to joining CCS, Noah helped develop sustainable resiliency strategies to address climate and ocean risk in vulnerable small island developing states and the Global South as part of the Stimson Center's Environmental Security Program. Noah has also previously worked with Birds Georgia and Environment America as a researcher and advocate for both bird and federal public land conservation policy. Noah graduated from the University of Vermont with a major in environmentally focused applied mathematics and a minor in computer science. Noah also holds a certificate on law, policy, and science and environmental peacebuilding from the Geneva Water Hub. Noah, thanks so much for joining us. Can you please share a bit more about your background and your career journey?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much, Courtney and David and the rest of the NWF team for putting on this important EcoCareers Summit. I think it's really great to be able to showcase a bunch of different career paths, and welcome to everyone who's joining us. Thank you for joining. Yeah, so my name is Noah Fritzhand, he, him pronouns, and I'm a research fellow, like Courtney said, at the Center for Climate and Security. And maybe I'll start by talking a little bit about what CCS is, because it's kind of a vague title. But we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan research institute, also sometimes known as a think tank, based in Washington, D.C., that looks at how climate change is impacting foreign policy and security policy, and how foreign policy is impacting responses to the climate crisis. And we're quite a small team. So everyone on the team does a little bit of everything, but maybe I'll outline a few of the key different pathways that we do our work. So one is research and policy recommendations. So we do a lot of writing and research, both policy briefings, blog posts, engaging with policymakers in both the US and internationally. We host fellowships for early and mid-career folks who are interested in climate and foreign policy. And those are usually like 6 to 10 month fellowships where they can learn across a variety of topics in that one area. We host community of practice and hold convenings. So we are the secretariat for what is known as the Climate and Security Working Group, which is a network of about 300 professionals in the US on the topics, the intersection of climate and foreign policy. And then we also do education and briefings on the Hill in the US for Congress. So we're a 501c3 organization, which is a fancy term for a non-advocacy organization. So we do research and education on a bipartisan basis. And now maybe I'll talk a little bit about the topical and programmatic areas that we do work. Courtney touched a little bit on it in the background, but I work across a wide variety of topics, including the intersection of food systems, climate change, and security. So how food insecurity can lead to violent conflict, And that work is primarily focused currently at EU policymakers in Europe. So looking at how NATO policymakers and European countries can better account for the benefits that global food system and sustainable agriculture provides for their security as countries. Another area of work that I do is on the ways that extreme weather events can open the door for climate mis and disinformation. So maybe not the typical climate denialism that you might think of, but how, for example, the hurricane in North Carolina opened the door for extremists and foreign actors to exploit uh, division within societies and blame certain groups, and what sort of solutions can be done for that. So that's focused at the US state level, working with local emergency managers to develop a toolkit for how they can combat some of that. Another area of work that I do is on renewable energy. So we have a project called Renewable Energy is National Security that's focused at governments in Japan, Korea, and Indonesia. So that project is focused on making the case for why the transition to solar and wind power is beneficial for their security as a country. They don't have to rely on importing fossil fuels from volatile areas, and oftentimes they're much more reliable. Renewables provide reliable solutions. And then the last topical area I'll mention is on the geopolitical dynamics of climate intervention, which is it's an emerging topic. You typically have climate adaptation community focused on how do we adapt to the worsening impacts of climate change. You have climate mitigation that's focused on the transition to clean energy and stopping the greenhouse gas emissions. And then this somewhat new area of climate interventions. Is there a way we could block sunlight from entering the atmosphere to kind of slow down the heating of the earth? So those are some topical areas that I work. And then on the administrative side, we're a nonprofit, so I also have visibility on an experience with grant writing, reporting on grants, which is primarily where we get funding from as a nonprofit, is largely family foundations or other philanthropic opportunities. So writing grants, reporting on what we have done with that money, hosting events, so doing the logistics for events, and then also coordinating travel for international convenings, bringing senior leaders to Washington, D.C., and so forth. So that's a little bit about what I do now, and maybe I'll take a step back and talk a little bit about how I got here. I think for many of us, my path has been both a combination of a lot of hard work and also some luck. Um, I'd say the through line through my career path thus far has been the desire to work collaboratively with people and also working on big, complex problems and working on finding solutions. And then also on the side, growing up, I had all these great, wonderful experiences outdoors in nature, camping with my family. But then I also lived through, worsening impacts of climate change. So Hurricane Sandy, with, a really bad hurricane, and also seeing terrible flooding in my family's town in Vermont. So I think all of this kind of combined to want me to focus my career on climate and climate adaptation generally. And also I have a strong draw towards public service. So I've always seen myself working either in government or a nonprofit sector. And that's primarily what I've done. All my experiences thus far have been with either of those categories. And so kind of putting that aside, my undergraduate experience at the University of Vermont was really a great opportunity for me to explore a lot of different topics and classes and disciplines. So looking back, it's really easy for me to say, like, I've always been interested in climate change and working on solutions, but I think at the time it was a little less clear. So I used my undergrad as a way to explore a lot of different areas. And I did a Bachelor of Arts, so I could take a wide variety of classes, even though I was a applied mathematics major. So I worked in 3 different labs in undergrad, one that was focused on developing solar cells, so lead-based solar cells. I worked in a lab on just transitions to renewable energy systems in the Canadian Arctic. And then one of the most impactful experiences of my undergrad experience was I did a 2 years honors thesis, research honors thesis with the U.S. Geological Survey. So I worked in a environmental engineering lab studying streamflow drought and using a novel machine learning algorithm to try and classify what was going on with streamflow drought in the Colorado River Basin. So kind of a really wide range of things that I worked on, and I think I would encourage a lot of folks, if you're in school right now, to take advantage of opportunities to really dip your toes into a bunch of different areas to get a sense for what you do like and also really importantly what you don't like. I think a lot of experiences I had have shown me, oh, I'm not that interested in X or I'm not that interested in Y. And I think that's just as important as figuring out what you are interested in. So after undergrad, I quickly started, or my senior year of undergrad is when I really ramped up my job search and quickly found that I was, going down the path of this intersection of science and policy. And I did struggle for a bit to find that first opportunity. I think that can be hard for folks. Um, so for a couple of months, I ended up working a few part-time volunteer internships where I ended up just cold emailing a bunch of organizations, being like, here's what I can offer you. Would you want to take me on as a volunteer? And then working to make some money, just in service or retail on the side so that I could build my resume. And that snowballed into landing that first full-time job at the Stimson Center, which is another research institute in Washington, D.C. And then that was a full year opportunity, and I was able to really build my network because we were, once again, also a very small team. And that snowballed into this opportunity I have now at the Center for Climate Security, which I've been at for coming up on 2 years now. So that's a little bit about me. I think to close, a few things I would say on pros and cons of working at nonprofits, because I imagine some of you are interested in what that looks like. Pros is that there's no, at least from my experience, there's been no shortage of work. So it's usually an all hands on deck experience. You learn a lot really quickly, and often, or in my case, I've had visibility on kind of high level things very quickly. So grant writing, grant reporting, meeting senior leaders, all that happened very quickly and early in my career, which I'm very thankful for. So it's really easy to jump in and kind of do a lot of different things and explore a lot of different topics. And then one of the downsides I might say is there's not, or maybe it's more of a neutral, but there's not always a lot of room for upward mobility in my experience. A lot of my colleagues I've worked primarily at nonprofits have kind of had to switch organizations or find new opportunities to gain more experience in their career over the long term. And then one final overarching thing I'll say is that's really helped me in my whole career and educational experiences. Don't be afraid to go outside your comfort zone. I think that's where I've really learned the most is my professor or my boss will come to me and say, hey, are you interested in writing about X? Or I'll go to them and say, hey, I'm really interested in writing about X. Can I do a research piece on this? And even if I'm not an expert, just being confident in my research abilities and stepping outside my comfort zone to take those opportunities. So I'll close there, and thanks so much, Courtney. Looking forward to hearing from everyone else too.
Thanks so much, Noah. Really great advice and really interesting insight. Appreciate you sharing. Next, we will hear from Shay Banton. Shay is an energy systems engineer, grid integration policy expert, and energy justice advocate with a decade of cross-sector experience working in utility regulation, clean energy development, and federally funded research and development. They specialize in designing and implementing equity-centered, engineering-informed policies that dismantle structural barriers to clean energy access, drive greater utility accountability, and elevate the needs of frontline and historically marginalized communities. Their work bridges technical systems thinking with justice driven policymaking to accelerate a just and inclusive energy transition. Um, Shay, thanks so much for joining us. Could you tell us a bit more about your own career path?
Absolutely. Thank you all again for having me. This is such a an honor to be at this part of my career where I get to give advice finally. Like it's so wild. But I'm hoping that it's gonna be some good advice for you all. So again, yeah, my name is Shay Banton. I use they, them pronouns. I've been in the industry for 10, 11 years so far. But let's go ahead and start back from the beginning to give you a little background of why I do what I do every day. I'm a Chicago born to a single parent immigrant from Jamaica and had pretty direct and measurable experience with energy poverty. Every month was a difficult month, trying to keep food on the table, trying to save up money. My mom trying to save money and also support family back home. So I had a lot of experience early on with how what are the financial struggles for so many Americans, especially immigrants around the country. And then I had an early opportunity when I was 14, after the passing of my grandma, to finally make our first trip back to Jamaica, my mom's first trip back in 20 something years, and then got to see the extent of energy poverty, how it is seen in other countries, which is so drastically different than the way that we experience it, and the harm that people experience. And in Jamaica, it's largely driven by foreign oil imports and the reliance on those systems, and kind of a pretty corrupt and difficult energy marketplace there. And so I learned pretty early on and kind of was driven towards some kind of social work, and that and being in Jamaica and seeing energy poverty and being interested in math and sciences, I went into electrical engineering and really found a passion for what my engineering expertise could do in developing countries in the future. So with that kind of background, in that want and drive, I was able to, in one of my senior projects in college, work on a little mini project that tried to basically examine how you could transition Jamaica to 100% renewable. Obviously, as an undergrad, my thought was very limited. My experience was very limited. My perspective of the complexity of the solution and the challenges that take place was very limited. And so from there, I was like, wow, I really don't know much at all. Even if I know all the power systems knowledge and I know sequence components and I can do analyses, that doesn't mean anything when it comes to actually transitioning a country into the future in a just manner. So from there, after doing that project and really getting passionate about development work, I started making any step I could to kind of advancing my knowledge of the energy landscape. So I started with going to a utility company. Also, kind of out of luck, it took me a while to find a job. So don't be pressured if you can't find a job at first. The marketplace is difficult, especially now. I can't even imagine, but please be patient. You will make it, I promise. But when I did, I got to a utility company in Indiana, which is a very interesting place to be of my queer and Black identity during a really formative time in a clean energy focused world where all of those things were not really accepted in the environment that I was. So I also want to highlight that often you may be in environments that are difficult from a social and personal perspective, but to not take that to heart and realize that you can keep going and still be yourself fully and truly whenever you are, because that's what's most important. So keep that true to yourself at all times. But at the utility company, I learned a lot about power systems, controls, and management of the electric grid. I also learned how things kind of seem to move very slowly at the utility companies, how they were still using standards from like the 1920s to dictate certain things, and people were kind of locked in their ways. And I was like very interested. I was like, this could be better. And I really want to do clean energy eventually. So after a couple of years there, I decided to apply to some jobs, and I got a job in Boston at a clean energy development company doing community solar projects. And I was so excited. I get to do community solar. I get to help communities adopt solar energy. Little did I know that community solar is often a moniker that doesn't actually mean community benefits. It's often something that just means larger projects. And so that's something I got to learn on the job, which is how policy may have terminology that may influence or push towards a certain mission. It may not always accomplish that mission. And so you really got to be focused in your work and keep true to yourself. And so at that developer company, I was able to do a lot of design of solar projects, but use my utility expertise to really being able to negotiate with utilities on like cost of interconnection and integration and different new analyses they can conduct to evaluate projects. And that like speaking kind of again in the lucky sense got me into a kind of policy making forum. They're like, oh, we want to hear from you in this like larger forum with larger experts, with utility executives versus just like engineers on the ground. And that was a really amazing opportunity for myself. I was able to really make a name for myself nationally at different, working with different national labs on various research efforts, and like kind of being a leading voice for grid integration reforms across the country. And that expertise and background allowed me to get another job out of the blue. Got lucky. Again, a lot of this is luck, but I got a call from the Department of Energy, and I got to become a technology manager with the Solar Energy Technologies Office. What that role entailed was really leading various national labs in their research efforts across the country on grid integration and interconnection topics, and also implementing things like the Justice 40 initiative, which I'm sure many of you've heard, part of the IRA back in the day, ensuring that 40% of the benefits will go to low and disadvantaged, low income and disadvantaged communities. That was a really amazing opportunity. I realized pretty early on, though, that research is a lot. I may not be a full researcher. I'm only a partial researcher. I like the policy making and writing and interaction with community members as well as engineers. So I like the intersection versus the doing on either side. And that has been and that was a really formative experience. Then at the DOE, I also got to learn how to interface with kind of pretty high-end officials. I got to work directly with Secretary Granholm on one of my proudest accomplishments. It's called the Interconnection Innovation Exchange. It got to lead a program, cross-department program across the Department of Energy, helping solve interconnection barriers in the transmission and distribution spaces. So that was really cool, really interesting, but I ended up burning out. So that's something I'll note in my definite recommendations is there's a lot you owe to yourself in your career objectives. And again, you put yourself first and don't let your job kind of take you away. So I'll get into that in a second. But after I left the DOE, I went to grad school to get my graduate degree in energy policy from Hopkins, and then finally landed in my current role, which is at the Interstate Renewable Energy Council. So I can finally get to tell you about my current role. I'm a regulatory program engineer and energy justice policy advocate with IREC. Our organization is focused on building the foundation for the clean energy future. We are 501c3 nonprofit as well, but we can advocate in certain places, not in others. We can't lobby legislation, but we can work in another realm, the regulatory realm, which I'll describe in a second. IREC focuses on three main pillars of foundation building. First is workforce development. So I will definitely share some resources if you want to know about solar career pathways. We have a lot of research and support tools for helping you find what careers there could be and what pathways, apprenticeships, college degrees, and other things like that that gets you to where you want to go. And then we also have this program called Local Initiatives, which works with local governments on permitting reforms, resiliency, and energy planning to basically embolden them to have the capability to make the decisions that are best for them and their constituents in terms of energy and clean energy access. And then I work in regulatory, which is, if those don't know, we think about the federal government, or we think of the government as these legislative bodies making policies, but after that policy is made, it has to be implemented. And the implementers in the energy space are utility commissions. Those are often unelected individuals who have a lot of power, and they have a lot of oversight over utilities, and they are try to hold utilities accountable to the measures that are in the legislation, but they aren't typically technical experts or those who are maybe knowledgeable about impacts of various communities. And so that's my job, informing them, helping being a technical expert, and then also bringing that energy justice focus into the fold. My topics range from grid disparity assessments, that's uncovering and understanding how grid infrastructure impacts certain communities differently or how it's been invested or disinvested in particular communities, as well as policy designs that lower interconnection barriers to certain communities like tribal nations and Black and Brown communities. That's a little bit about me, but I have a lot more to say later, but it's so great to meet you all and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Shay. Really great insight. And I'm sensing a theme from both Noah and Shay. It's really important to figure out what you like and also what you don't like. So those are important tips for sure. Thank you so much. All right, so next we will hear from Jabari Walker. Jabari S. Walker leads the Office of Sustainability at Bowie State University, where he oversees campus sustainability initiatives, energy monitoring, campus and community restoration efforts, and student engagement programs, while serving as principal investigator on several sustainability and energy-related grants. He also manages the university's insurance portfolio, chairs the campus climate commitment committee, and advises the BSU Student Green Ambassadors, and serves as vice chair of the BSU Staff Council. A very busy person. Jabari, thank you so much for being with us, and I will turn it over to you to share about your career path.
Thank you, Courtney. I appreciate it. And thank you and David and really everybody with NWF. Thanks for everybody who's here today. First, let me say both Noah and Sway gave some incredible backgrounds, some incredible journeys and stories. I feel like I have a lot in common with both of you. So I mean, I love hearing that sort of thing. That's why I think panels like this are important because you get the chance to hear, you know, what your colleagues are doing and some of the fascinating work that they're doing. So kudos to both of you. Sarah as well, even though I've heard from Sarah yet, but I'm sure she's doing some incredible things as well. Um, so, as Courtney mentioned, I'm the Sustainability and Energy Coordinator at Bowie State University. And for those of you that may not be familiar, Bowie is actually in between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, closer to D.C. We are part of the University System of Maryland and the oldest HBCU in the state of Maryland. So where to begin? So I'm originally from Raleigh, North Carolina, and at the time more of a mid-sized city. It's a little bit larger now, but mid-sized city. And we grew up with a large backyard with trees, plenty of grass, woods. Back in the woods, there was a pond back there. So I grew up surrounded by nature and embracing it without really even knowing it. We had all kinds of animals and creatures in our backyard, for better or for worse. And so that's kind of how I grew up. My maternal grandparents actually lived only about 7 or 8 minutes away in the city, but they had a garden where they grew almost every kind of vegetable you could think of, flowers, fruit trees, and all that in the city. So that's kind of, a background of where I came from. And similar to what Noah had mentioned, there was a major hurricane, Hurricane Fran, that hit when I was in high school. And, that affected us. It was a major devastation to the area. So those kind of things always had an interest for me, nature and weather, all of that. So go figure, when I got to college, I actually did choose to major in biology, but it was actually biology pre-med. So to be honest with you all, I did not attend school for a career in sustainability or the environment. I kind of stumbled across this, but for one, 20 plus years ago, there really weren't a lot of degree programs at that time specifically touching on this line of study. But nonetheless, while I did love biology itself, some of the courses in undergrad, I went to Hampton University in Virginia, had me change my major to psychology, which is what I got my degree in 4 years. And later, I got my master's in public administration, which is an MPA. And with an MPA, my goal was to become a manager or director at a governmental agency or a public agency or office. But I actually took my first job in higher education as an admissions counselor at a small private school in Wilson, North Carolina. So on that job, I fell in love with higher education, even though that was more of a beginner's job. So I learned a lot. I got to travel and all that because you're recruiting students I was recruiting from the Northeast. So it was a fun job. But after working there for a few years, I migrated north here to Maryland, where the idea was to get into the federal government at the time. But again, I loved higher education so much. So I actually ended up working at UMBC, which stands for University of Maryland, Baltimore County. That's where I worked in research and sponsored programs, which is the office that handles processing grants and proposals and awards and all that. So while the work there was very rewarding, because in a sense, you're bringing in millions and millions of research dollars to the institution that essentially will help benefit all of us, the kind of research that they're doing, it wasn't really fulfilling to me because I kind of felt the job was more of a processing type of job, and that's not really what I wanted. So after working there for a few years, I upgraded my position and moved on to Bowie State, where I am now, where I was the assistant to the vice president for administration and finance. In that role, I was doing pretty much executive level duties, supporting the vice president in the office. And while I had no experience, I was also in charge of sustainability and insurance for the campus. So, and no, the two are not related, but those were the primary programs I was responsible for at the university. Um, and actually, the reason that I got the experience and expertise in sustainability was the years of the trainings and conferences and workshops that I attended. all the connections that I made. And that's actually how I got the knowledge that I have in sustainability. And it's something I actually love doing. So about 5 years ago, the university decided to make the sustainability portion its own full-time position and then added energy to it, which are not quite related. They can kind of go hand in hand in some ways, but I'm sure, and even Sway could tell you that energy is a very specialized field in many cases. It's very technical, but nonetheless, that's part of my role now. And so I can say basically that I'm the first sustainability energy coordinator at Bowie State. My job has been extremely rewarding. To kind of give you a snapshot of what I do, I won't get into everything that I've done, but it's very versatile and no day is exactly the same. I will say that I touch a little bit on everything. I get a chance to work with staff, I work with faculty, I work with students, I work with external partners. Sometimes it's mostly in the office, sometimes it's meetings, sometimes it's out in the field, or what I call the field, which is like outside events. Um, and as you all can imagine, running a college is like running a small town. So there are a lot of different things you touch on. And I am a one-man office. I forgot to mention that part to you. The sustainability office is me. So as you can imagine, it's a lot of things involved with that. But some of the departments that I've worked with is waste management, including food waste, like composting from the dining hall. We have transportation. We have our own fleet. So we're looking at exploring electrifying our vehicles here, increasing the electric vehicle charging stations. When new buildings are designed for the campus, I have input in that. Are we maximizing how sustainable those buildings are? BSU is surrounded by woods. So a project that I'm working on right now is restoring some of the natural trails that are part of our campus. I help plan certain events like stream cleanup events, tree plantings, um, we're looking at getting a microgrid for our campus right now. So I'm the coordinator for that. That's a major task. If you don't know what a microgrid, I won't explain it to you right now, but many of you probably know, but just Google it so you'll know what that is. But I was instrumental in bringing grants for that project. And a huge part of what I do, of course, is education because that's what we're here to do in higher education. So helping to plan seminars and activities on topics such as environmental justice issues, the connection between the environment and the health, learning about renewable energy, and all of that are some of the things that I kind of help coordinate. I was responsible for bringing the world's first known solar operated bus stop on the college campus. That's pretty cool. And I guess one of the coolest projects I've done is a restoration project on a place of campus called Peace Park. That part was originally designated to any student who might have lost their lives while they were a student, and it kind of fell off over after a certain amount of years. So I was able to bring that up. We incorporated some stormwater management. We planted trees, some native flowers. We added a park bench. We added the first and only solar street light on the campus. So we've done some incredible things over there. I've also created the Climate Career Expo, which is similar to what we're doing right now, is to kind of get students interested in doing careers in with the environment and sustainability. So had some incredible opportunities at Bowie State, and I love what I do here because it changed all the time. Um, I guess I'll just end with maybe a few pointers that I've learned. And again, some of these are similar to what Noah and Sway had to say. First thing is, it's not necessarily about your degree, because you see, I'm not doing necessarily what I went to school for, really. It's really about your passion for something that interests you and that you like, and it's really about your experience. I would say also, don't just learn specifically about your specialized area, but learn more about other topics that relate to you, what you're doing, as well as work that may not even relate as well because society and the workforce values those with well-rounded experience because it shows that you can tackle so many different things at once. And in this new age where we're competing with AI and whatnot, it will benefit you to learn as much as you can on many things you can and be a true expert and not let AI be the expert. The last thing I would say is allow everything that you do to prepare you for the next step. Case in point, the job that I mentioned about being a grants and contract specialist wasn't really something that actually interests me. But I learned on that job. I had an opportunity to learn. And so now I'm getting involved with grants for the university. So one of the latest ones, we had a higher education clean energy grant for about $750,000 that we just recently got from the Maryland Energy Administration. And I got this experience from that job, that past job, working with grants and contracts, and it kind of helped, get some of the knowledge that I have today. So I'll just end with never stop learning. There's never a point in your life where you should say, I'm done learning, I'm good. And I know many of you were in school or thinking, I need a break, but there's always ways to continue to learn. I'm still learning, and I'm sure my colleagues are as well. So that's one thing I will say, just keep your brains young and never stop learning. And I'll end at that for now.
Great way to end. Yeah, thank you so much, Tabari. Really great advice and really interesting career path, and kudos on all the great things you've initiated at Bowie. All right. So next, we will move on to Dr. Sarah Love. Dr. Sarah J. Love is an ORISE postdoctoral fellow with the U.S. Geological Survey's Northeast Climate Adaptation Science Center, also known as Northeast CASC, and the University of Massachusetts Amherst. She works with scientists and natural resource managers to support collaborative, data-driven, and transparent decision-making in the face of climate and ecosystem change. Through her work, she uses decision science to help bring together complex ecological dynamics and diverse agency perspectives into practical management approaches that support climate adaptation. Sarah, thanks so much for being here. And like the speakers before you, I invite you to share a bit about your career journey.
Thanks. Yeah, and thanks Noah and Shay and Jabari for sharing so openly and with great detail. I think the last time I checked, yeah, we have 27 attendees here, and I want to talk to all of you one-on-one. I'm very curious what questions you came here with, and hopefully getting some perspective from this panel will help you, even if you just have more questions at the end of the day. I can't speak for the rest of the panelists, but I will say that if you resonate with anything that I share or the work that we're doing, or just want to reach out, my email, I think, is my email listed? Courtney, do you know?
Um, we can certainly share it again if
I'll
it's
write
not.
it here.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
I'll write it here right now. Reach out, because you'll have time at the end for questions, but a lot of, what I'm going to share is based on my value system. And one of the values that I hold most dear to my heart is curiosity and always asking questions. And so I encourage you to do that yourself. I'm volunteering my email and don't know if others will want to do that, but yeah, so as Courtney said, I'm Sarah Love. I'm a postdoc with the USGS and the Northeastern Climate Adaptation Science Center. And how I got here was basically just always asking how I can be a harmonizer and a helper. So from a very early age, I understood that I wanted people to get along and I wanted things to function as well as they could. And so with that comes the questions of, why are people not getting along and why are things not operating well? And so I lead with this instead of leading with, the details of my path, because I think that I could have ended up in a variety of places and would have been satisfied. So I am in this specific place because it meets my objectives and it aligns with my values. But I also have seen a variety of different career paths that seem like they would be satisfactory. And so as you're navigating this, you know, your unique career path, just keep that in mind. I encourage you to be very explicit with yourself about your values and where they could lead you, and not necessarily where the right career path would go next, or what job should come after the next. Because leading with what you care about, the sacred values close to your heart, you have no idea what doors could open, and they may just be the right one. You're making a decision based on your values, and that leads to the right next step rather than what someone's told you. I'm saying this also because I'm sitting currently at the National Conservation Training Center, which is in Shepherdstown, Virginia, taking a week-long course in decision science. And so I'll now step back and explain a little bit about what I do and how I've got here. But that's, I think, like the most important message that I'll share. So, yeah, as I said, I started out in life just really wanting to know how I could help people um, be happier on the planet, and how I could help the planet be happier given that people are here. And so I started out in undergrad studying psychology, actually, thinking that that is the path that I would go on. And I want to make a note here, which is I switched undergrad studies majors a variety of times because I did not think that I had the wherewithal to go through a PhD. And I assumed that if you studied psychology, you needed a PhD. And it turns out that I have the ability to do a PhD. Most of you do, if that is what you want to do. There are ways to navigate the system, and I'm happy to share specifics of how to navigate the system if people are interested in graduate school. But right there is an assumption that we should have checked at the door. But I hopped around a lot, and eventually decided that I wanted to study ecology. I did a variety of things from, forestry to AmeriCorps, and I did a post-bac research assistantship studying dung beetle gut microbiomes, and did some water sampling, and all the while just continuing following what felt most aligned with my values of learning and probing how the natural world works and how we can understand that to help ourselves and help the natural world. So that led me to graduate school, where I did my PhD at the University of Tennessee in ecology and evolutionary biology. And a specific piece of advice, if you're wanting to go to graduate school, that I received from my mother-in-law, actually, because I did not come from a higher education family, was obviously, outside of making sure you are in the right topical area, make sure that you are aligned with your advisors, because you never know if you're going to go through a pandemic with them, or have a serious medical issue, or have a personal crisis of some sort, or just generally you need that support, right? So I picked my advisors largely based on how I got along with them. And it turned out to be a wonderful experience. So I studied um, essentially how trees in the southwestern United States have evolved under climate change. And so my PhD was using this natural laboratory that I was able to help establish, where we had populations of really stressed, climatically stressed trees. And we compared what was going on in those populations of trees and how their soil microbial organisms were helping or hindering them adapt to climate change, in comparison to populations that were less stressed. So it was a great opportunity to travel and see how this, how ecological theories were established, laying the foundation of what we know. However, throughout my PhD, I had this itch. And I'm going to connect it back to Persephone in the chat. Um, had a comment about, passion and not really feeling aligned with their organization, and maybe they're too passionate. And I had an itch that maybe is similar to having this like itch of I feel too passionate. There's a misalignment, right? I had an itch that um, my work was not enough. What I was doing was not enough. We were studying all of this stuff, bringing 10,000 trees back into the greenhouse and looking at, everything from population genetics to ecoevolutionary processes and how the microbial communities functioned, and doing all of this basic science. But how is it being used was my question. And that was my like, to Persephone, like there's this question of, am I too passionate? My question was, am I doing enough? And no one around me wanted to address this. And it was very frustrating. And I had a lot of energy around that frustration. And so I tabled it and said, I need to finish my PhD, do the best that I can, got my work out, knowing, and I was a little bit too late to change tracks, but knowing that the next step will come. And so by the time that it was time to apply for postdocs, I found this opportunity that was, improving decision making in the context of climate adaptation was the title of the postdoc. And I applied for it. It was the first thing that I applied for. I was maybe 9 months out of defending. I had gotten advice from someone to apply earlier than you were ready to get the job so that you get experience interviewing. And so by the time that you're ready to take a job, you'll be more prepared. It turns out that you can also do this and have it backfire in a beneficial way where I applied early and got the job. And so it was a good thing, but I did start my postdoc about 4 months before I defended. So this postdoc is all about management and how we are applying the science that we produce in academic institutions on the ground. So again, like taking the values forward, the value of how do we actually help, where we are and where we're going. I led with that. And so now I'm at the Northeastern Cask. To tell you a little bit about what that is before I dive into what we do. So, the CASCs, the Climate Adaptation Science Centers, are a USGS organization, but we importantly partner with universities across the nation. And so we have regional offices, we also have a national office. And so this is the partnership between USGS and academia. And so you get the resources of academic institutions. So my host university is at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. But we have all of, we have Cornell, we have the University of Vermont, like where Noah came from. We have a variety of other institutions in the Northeastern region that affiliate with NECASC, as we call it. And this is true across the nation. So you get those university resources, which are often very different from what's available on the federal side. But on the federal side, you have the applied aspect. And so we have people like everyone that I'm here with at this training who are doing management on the ground. They are the decision makers. And so this is a pipeline to actualize basic science, which if depending on where you are in your career, you may or may not have seen that sometimes that's really hard to do. Academia is often very disconnected from applied ecology. And so this is one massive solution. So with NECASC, I'm working with a team of 9 other people in my core advisory committee. So these are people from USGS, Fish and Wildlife Service, and National Park Service. And we are helping land managers with the Fish and Wildlife Service and National Park Service. So USGS is like the science arm of Fish and Wildlife Service. And so we are kind of helping these two other federal organizations with their science and like with capacity, because especially in 2026, capacity is maybe one of our scarcest resources, especially in the federal government. So we're helping the land managers decide what to do in the face of climate change. So for one project, there is a threat of sea level rise on freshwater impoundments that are being managed for migratory birds. And I've come in and have helped to digest the complex climate change data, and habitat data, like all the ecological implications. And then on the other side, we have a project with the Park Service where they're wanting to look at all of their marshes in the entire northeastern region and ask which ones are most threatened by climate change and what they can do. And so there's this big there's a broad variety of things that I'm working on from day to day. But ultimately, now I am able to kind of loop back in with the value of harmonizing and operationalizing science, harmonizing relationships and operationalizing science, because I'm doing a lot of facilitation. And so I'm bringing large groups of people together, asking tribal nations, asking stakeholders, asking scientists what they value, how they what they want to do about it, what they care about, and how we move forward together in the face of uncertainty. And so I truly, I could not have planned for this position, but day to day, and again, being here at this training, I'm looking around just in awe with how aligned this position is right now with my values. It's interesting that there's this, human psychological component of decision making that I've been able to tap back into from my early interest in psychology. But it just showcases that, to me, I connect with, the idea of a web, or a network within oneself. And there are times and places where you're gaining experience in one area. So maybe it's, doing an entire PhD is gaining experience in everything from grant writing to research to self-regulation. Dear God, in a PhD, there's a lot of stress. And then you go and do another thing and you gain experience there. But overall, you are creating a network of a whole self that is able to, be utilized in a variety of scenarios. So, um, Persephone, I know I'm calling you out a lot because I really resonated with your comment or question. But probe your passion, probe your passion, probe your passion. And if you're feeling like there's this like energy that you're not able to put towards something, at the very least for that moment, acknowledge it, write it down, and continue seeking opportunities to express that. Even if it is in an artistic form, I'm an artist, I'm a dancer, I do a lot of movement. I think in our field where we're working with such high stakes, high stress questions, it is imperative that we have a place for expressing and for grieving, right? So there's that. And if you're just truly dissatisfied with your career and feeling unseen, probe that and note that you can pivot, reach out to people like me and others on your panel and the mentors that you have and express what you're feeling. So those are my big takeaways. Values are huge. Understanding what we care about helps us understand where to go. And then reach out to your people. So make sure that you're in communication about how you're feeling, document your process. This is your path. And the more that you can take a step back and ask yourself, how would I write this up in a story to a child? How would I write my narrative? How would I write about my frustrations and my successes? It gives you a lot of really valuable insight about who you are, where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, and where you want to go. So I'll leave it with that. Excited to talk to you all in the Q&A. And thanks so much, Courtney and David, for inviting me to speak here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. Really, really insightful advice. And thank you so much for sharing about your career journey. As Sarah mentioned, she already answered this question in the chat, but I just wanted to read it again in case others in the panel would like to chime in with their thoughts as well. Persephone asked if anyone has experience with being too intensely passionate. They noted that they are neurodivergent and have struggled to break into a full-time eco career. And as such, they've ended up doing most of their activism independently and unpaid, as organizations haven't really had the space for the intensity of their activism. So just wanted to open the floor if others have thoughts they wanted to share as well.
Maybe I can start us off. Totally understand and totally resonate with that feeling. Um, I do recognize that, again, being POC and queer, like there's been spaces in which I haven't had a voice, right, at all, and like had to kind of listen in and work in the background. I don't think that is how it should be nowadays. But I do think what you're saying, Sarah, in terms of aligning things with your values, that sometimes, again, you can have these items that are aligned with your values outside of your work as well as within your work. But then you can leverage your workplace and your choice of workplace to build up certain skills that allow you to better serve your passion. I think that's a really important point. So even if the passion isn't able to like fully flourish in the space that you're working in, making sure that workplace gives you the skills and gives you the needs and the abilities that would be necessary to further build upon your passion, either outside of that work or at the next position where you can better align it. So definitely think about those skills that it's giving you throughout.
Yeah, and I was just gonna chime in to second what my colleagues have been saying. You're definitely not alone. Speaking for myself, I know I feel like that often. And I know a lot of my colleagues across the different organizations I've worked at have felt similarly. And almost all of them have had outlets outside of the job to either volunteer or sit on the board of another nonprofit or as another way to kind of contribute to the community in a way that might not fit within the confines of your job description. So I'd say you're not too passionate. And as Sarah said, keep probing, different opportunities for you to express that passion. We need young, passionate people getting involved in these topics. So yeah.
I'll add the last part. I mean, I think really all of them kind of summed up what I would say. And yeah, you're not alone. You may have been in the wrong groups at the time where you were expressing these things. I shouldn't say wrong, but maybe not around the people who share the same passion that you have. But I guarantee you there are people out there with them. I know it may be difficult sometimes to seek them out and find them, but I think they're pretty much groups or organizations and clubs for almost any kind of passion that exists that you have out there, or there are other people at least that feel that way. So maybe you might be the one to create that space for others to join. If you create it and put it out there, you'll be surprised that people might be interested, just as interested as you are. So it may not be necessarily your paid job, but like my colleagues were saying, maybe something that you can do in addition to that. So that's just something to consider. But keep the passion, I would say.
Much. Again, Shay gave their advice in the Q&A box, but just in case any of the other panelists want to chime into this question that was asked as well, Estelle asked if you have any tips for navigating early career uncertainty, in particular as a queer person, especially in environments that are often alienating or unwelcoming. And again, I know, yeah, Shay gave a great answer in the Q&A box. So if others don't have things to chime in on, that's completely fine. Just wanted to give the opportunity. And we do have another question specifically for Dr. Love and others who might have insight as well. But Judy asked if you are seeing conservation workers move away from the federal government due to the recent funding instability, and if so, what impact has that had on how work gets done?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not just funding instability, right? There have been cuts. Um, so not only are we uncertain of the future, there have just been programs that have been cut writ large. And there have been now 3 deferred resignation program forks in the road for federal workers, basically to have a choice to forego a lot of retirement benefits or retire early. And so we have lost a tremendous amount of the workforce. It has been destabilizing. And I came in January 2025. And so that was right when things were starting up. So I actually don't have a baseline to compare things to, but I have probed my colleagues a lot about, is this normal? It seems like we should be doing this over here. And they're like, oh, no, we used to do this, but it was completely cut. And so again, like I don't think I said this at the beginning, but I am an idealist, as well as being a harmonizer and actualizer. And so, also going back to that passion piece, I ref I'm here. So like my perspective is I'm here. The people around me are here. What can we do in that context? There are a couple of important pieces leading up to that, which is one, grieving what was lost and acknowledging that this is, unacceptable and maybe not aligned with the majority of the nation's values, and figuring out how to navigate that internally and within your work, but also looking around and saying, we can still get a lot done together. And so how it's affected, my work, again, this has always been my work. But being in, space where people are thinking very deeply about the quality of the decisions that they are making has been fundamental to my perspective on what's going on in the federal government. Understanding that there are brilliant people, there are 26 of them sitting in that room that I can hear right now about to go to dinner, that are thinking so critically about what to do in the face of uncertainty has given me an entire lifetime of hope and not just hope, but energy to move forward. And so we're seeing a lot of people focus very sharply on how we can get around the restrictions in language. We're still going to do the work that's needed around climate change, even if we have to call it ecological transitions or whatever it may be. We are still going to support our queer and POC communities, no matter if we can be explicit about it or not. Like there's a understanding of grassroots organizing an energy that will never be squashed. Yeah, I think my perspective on it is just how can I like stoke that fire as best as possible, and support the people around me to do the best work that they can, even if it's in a restricted, set or number of people. I don't know if I think that answered your question. Just
Maybe
persist, persist, persist. Use that passion to never. Yeah, sorry, no.
No, I was just going to jump into to second what Sarah was saying about there definitely has been a lot lost, and as an organization that, interacted quite closely with the previous administration and different federal agencies, a lot of our partners who we worked with are now former, federal workers. But I think one aspect of hope that I'll share is that there is a lot of deep thought about what comes next and how do we, build back things that may have been lost in a more equitable and sustainable way. How do we create a system that, rises after this? Period, because this period won't last forever. And the majority of people do want to work on solutions towards climate change. Um, and also, I'll say, having experience working at the local and state level, I think there has been a real hunger amongst our partners to do more at the state and local level. And so I would say that working on federal policy, while it's really, really important, um, there's also a real need for people working at the local and state level to build solutions kind of from the bottom up almost. And there's a real appetite at those levels for creative solutions. So I would say look to those places too for potential opportunities or learning, reach out to people in your wherever you are in your state or in your county or your small town and talk about ways that you could, you know, work on these challenges there.
Plus, plus, plus for both Sarah and Noah, especially Noah, the notes on the local perspective. I did want to, uh, yeah, second again, the impact, my organization itself. I mean, really, like we lost 70% of our funding last year due to federal cuts. Most of our team were let go, and we've been struggling ever since. That was one of the most difficult periods I've experienced as a career professional. Seeing my friends and colleagues lose positions that were helping communities in Puerto Rico build resilience after Hurricane Maria, helping local communities advocate for themselves in public hearings. It was really hard. But I mean, if we think about the course of history, we've done more with less, right? This is not a time to, shrink ourselves. It's a time to elevate and be as loud as possible, right? Now it's time to scream from the rooftop. So, being positive in that sense. And I think one thing that I've been really grappling with, being in an advocate space, in a space that's been, so kind of decimated by the current administration in so many forms, is that we're all overachievers and we all care so passionately about these topics. So when we can't accomplish our goals, it becomes really distressing. But we have to think differently about success. And I think the people whose shoulders we stand on definitely thought about it differently. We won't see the end goal. Right. We won't see the world that we want to come to fruition, but we will take steps to get there and make it easier for the next person to take steps closer. Right. So if you take those small steps and are okay with taking those small steps and knowing that you're helping someone else get there in the future, and they'll look back and thank you, just like we thank our forefathers and foremothers and for people that have helped us. I think that's something that keeps me going every single day. So I hope you can kind of keep that in your heart as well.
Thanks so much to you both. Relatedly, this next question was directed to Sarah, but I think likely applicable to all panelists. And Shay, you kind of just touched on it, but how do you stay positive and not experience burnout in this field?
Yeah, I was just writing a response to that, but I'll just read what I wrote and then say what I was going to write. Um, Generally, my perspective is that hard things have happened before. I'm just alive for this kind of hard thing, and so are a ton of brilliant people, and I will find them and link arms with them and hold on with all of my might. Um, Additional foundational components, like one is I don't think that it's positivity. I think I'm hard-headed. Um, I like acknowledge that there is resilience to be curated. And so I find all of the ways possible to curate it. So there's nothing off the board. I am a Qigong instructor. I go to therapy. I do spoken word. I talk very openly with my colleagues, even if it's not, the cultural norm. I operate on my value system. And try and find ways to support, you know, to support myself like psychologically. The other thing that I think is really that I think a lot about, and I don't know if other people will resonate with this, and this may be a little nihilistic, and I totally acknowledge that I'm a little nihilistic, is I studied evolution. And I take an evolutionary perspective to a lot of this, like we get really stressed about things that are fair to be stressed about, like changes in species composition and invasives and habitat loss. And I think I just take a step back and ask, like, what are unique things that could come from all of this craziness? Like the dinosaurs existed and we've been hit by a bajillion asteroids and like from the like ecological loss and grief perspective, that's kind of the step back that I take. But again, I think I combined a little dose of nihilism, a little dose of hard-headedness, and a ton of community support. Like the people around me are what keep me going. So it's not me, it's a product of all of the brilliant minds that I've been like, how are you still here? How are you still here? And that's just up to you to decide. Maybe an evolutionary perspective is like, what crazy? That seems maybe to some people horrible, and I totally accept that, and it doesn't work for you. And just find like if you're aware that there's a sense of positivity or resilience that you would like to have, figure out how to have it because you can and still be realistic and seeing the suffering and seeing the work that needs to be done. So don't live in an idealistic place. I'm not a positive person all the time, but I'm generally trying to like balance, yeah, like the serious work that has to be done with how do I do it for the rest of my life. Curious what other people think.
Yeah, I like to chime in. Sarah, that was you mentioned some great points. And sometimes people don't realize that even in this higher education, that this is not still not really a safe um job in many ways, because there are a lot of threats even coming here. And fortunately in Maryland, Maryland does kind of support, climate change work solutions. But the thing is, a lot of the grant and money and funding that came through, what we got from Maryland came eventually from the federal government. And that's all been cut. At the same time, now I know our university, actually the entire system of Maryland is facing some major budget cuts right now. And they have to look at some schools have to look at laying off certain people. So who are they going to look at? What kind of positions are they looking at? So it can be stressful, at no matter which side of the, I guess, category you're in. But I will say, and I think Sarah mentioned this, is one thing that has helped me in this space is talking to colleagues in the field, people that I met over the years in these different conferences and different summits, different networking type events. We have all kinds of not all kinds, but we have a few group chats and whatnot where people kind of express. It's okay to express some negative things because you need that support and positive feedback from others. And that's kind of how we get it. So creating those networks of people, creating those small groups, and really, they kind of keep me motivated to do this work. I inadvertently keep them motivated as well. I would say that's one of the things. And also, of course, the work-life balance, because when you get so caught up in your passion, it really can kind of burn you out. So you have to be very careful about it. And sometimes you do have to slow your pace and just kind of look at other things that you like doing. I mean, I like spending time outside. I mean, I enjoy nature. I'm not a fitness guru, but I do believe in health and fitness, and I like doing certain things that kind of help the physical body, and that helps your mental state as well. So I would say the two keys for me, at least, would be finding that network, those peers that can relate to you and what you're going through, and then also just find that work-life balance and doing things that you really enjoy doing. That's good for you.
I can add one more. That's going completely agree. Those are such great points, Jabari. And to build on that, the things that you like doing, I think one thing that I wish I would have done earlier in my career, and I still kind of struggle with today, and I think it's always going to be an exercise, by the way, of finding that work-life balance. It's not solved by any one mechanism or any one thought or advice people give you. But one thing that's helped me is taking a moment to write down what you value most in your life and what gives you strength. So, like Jabari said, being outside a certain amount of time each day, whether it's working out, whether it's eating right, whether it's family or hobbies, write those down and have that list close to heart and accessible. So when you start working and you get too passionate, you feel yourself being strained, look and refer back to that list and say, what of my values am I currently overlooking and it's not feeding my soul right now? What am I currently, yeah, what's currently deficient in feeding my soul right now? And how can I get back to that? Because that's going to be really important when you care so deeply about the topics that you're working on. That's why I went into burnout, and I've been doing that exercise ever since, and it's been really helpful. So, hope that.
One other thing that I'll add, I think, is something that I've had to work on, and like Shay and the rest of my colleagues have said, I think this is kind of a lifelong process of finding out what works for you and how to maintain that work-life balance. For me, I think it's been really important to set clear boundaries with your bosses or advisors or whoever that may be. So even though it's really hard because I am so passionate about the work that I do, and I'm sure my co-panelists are as well, that yeah, it's really easy to get sucked in, but I think it's essential to have that time for yourself and to not feel guilty about taking time to just, you know, de-stress and be outside or move your body in a different way. So setting clear boundaries. So for me, that's looked like, you know, making a clear effort to not respond to emails outside of a certain hour on a regular basis, or in an interview process, asking the interviewers, you know, is this something that's going to be accepted, or is more going to be asked of me? So I think all those things are ways to make it more possible for you to get a work-life balance. And then, as Jabari said, for me personally, I think spending time outside, um, and spending time alone too, because that's helpful for me just to focus on my own thoughts, and in a job that's so um, surrounded by working with other people. I think it's also important to have time for yourself too.
Thank you all so much. Really great answers. Um, Looks like one question just came in, uh, thanking all the panelists that all of this information has been super informative. They're curious to know your thoughts on the impact of AI on the environmental career market, and also whether you are choosing to embrace AI to increase productivity or reject the mainstream use of it due to potential effects on the environment.
Well, I can start off that one. That's a very good question
Mhm.
because um, it's one of those. It's almost like a double-edged sword because really we kind of all use AI even if we don't mean to. You know, our phones use AI every single day, and they've been doing this for years. So, and that's a form of AI. And of course, you know, working in higher education, that's something that in general most of higher education is actually embracing it because they're trying to find innovative ways to improve it, and even expand AI. I know here there's a big program that's starting for AI to train people on that. But on my end, I do know the environmental impacts of what it's doing with these huge data centers and all that, and it is harmful to the environment. So I hate to say it, I'm kind of on the fence because I know that there are a lot of benefits to using AI. Some things can actually help us to improve the environment if we use it correctly. But then there's the other side where it's actually physically harming the environment. I feel that it's more of an opportunity at this point for those, especially in this age group, the younger generation especially, to look at innovative ways to solve the problem without the detrimental impacts in the environment. Because I do think there are ways to do it without causing so much harm. And there still can be ways to use AI. We have to use it carefully though, because it's something that can be really out of control and could take over, not to be a conspiracy theorist or anything, but it really could take over our lives if we allowed to go too far. So it's it's kind of a balance. You embrace certain parts of it, but then you understand the environmental impacts and let people know that, because a lot of people don't know what these data centers are doing. And the more people know, the more people can kind of fight on the policy end. I think Shay talked a lot about policy. That's a big part of it too. So it's so much to this AI, but it's a great question. It's a lot of different moving parts to it. I hope that helps a little bit though, from my perspective.
I was just going to
Thank you,
add
Jabari.
from my perspective, I haven't, at least in my circles, I have not seen AI take away jobs in the climate or environmental space like it has maybe in other more technical areas like software engineering. I think because of the people-focused nature of the work, there's still you need people leading that, obviously. So I don't think that the careers are at risk of totally disappearing because of AI. I would say as somebody who studied machine learning algorithms in college, I know kind of how limited some of them can be and how bounded they are and how they really just are a fancy search engine most of the time. So I think the ways that I have experimented with it have not always been very productive because I find that I'm constantly having to fact check what it's saying, or it's making up, fake citations, or it is totally removing my own voice from a certain piece of writing. So I think there is maybe a greater need than ever to develop your own personal voice in your writing, in your speaking, and to put that at the forefront because uh, it's just more important than ever. Um, and so, yeah, sorry, that was kind of a jumbled take of ideas, but I'll pass it over to Shay.
It's great. No, I know what you're talking about. That was awesome. Um, I was just going to weigh in as an advocate that works on some of these AI data center issues from the integration and community benefits and community opposition perspective. It is definitely a difficult question to answer. One, from an advocate space, because we are small. Advocate spaces that we know are going to be much smaller. The eco careers are very small compared to these big tech giants and especially big utilities, big oil and gas executive and groups. And those groups utilize AI more than anyone. And so, like, I'm writing comments by hand that are written by a team of lawyers at one utility, and they're swamping us. Like, they're kind of like bulldozing us right now. And it's kind of like a hard place to be in to say, like, we want to, be um, ecocentric and focus on the environment and responsible operations while fighting against organizations that don't have those same values or systems. And so I'll just say that I'm also, like Jabari, on the fence in certain aspects, trying to figure out how to navigate an increasingly difficult advocacy space that's being fueled again by the AI revolution, while also, on the other hand, in the development of data center space, there's actually been an interesting, I'm not sure people recognize this, but one group that people are kind of expecting would be very against AI data centers are certain indigenous communities. But actually, a lot of indigenous communities are trying to embrace and try to bring data centers as an aspect of grid infrastructure investment and community benefits and wealth creation through certain agreements with those entities. So I think there's also some like novelty or nuances that aren't necessarily addressed in the larger discourse that I think if you dive a little bit more into it, I think you'd find some really interesting perspectives coming up from people from the grassroots who are really tackling the ecological questions while also operating within really hard and difficult socioeconomic environments, right? So balancing that is really hard and important. But yeah,
I didn't want to answer this question. And I don't know like what is going to happen. We can talk about the, theories or conspiracies or fear. Um, And that's just not like that's a different conversation um for like that I want to talk on. Well, I guess it's related actually. So the if I let myself go to the place of the world is going to be dominated by robots and AI, where I go back to is okay, so how do I like what do I value that would be lost there? And how would I be able to still be a valuable member of society in that world? And that's where I have actually been taking many different measures to um, connect back with natural skills and plant identification and edible plants. I'm now found in the woods more often than not, munching on something. I'm pretty good at plant ID, and so I am still here, but you know, there's always the chance that no. Um, but I connect back to, yeah, like what are the skills that will be here for humans that I care about and that I can share with my community, regardless of what this, you know, potential future looks like. So that's, you know, the perspective that I take. And those are the small actionable tasks and steps that I'm taking to give myself that mental resilience. I know at the end of the day that I could start a small school teaching adults how to identify plants and make foods with wild foraged edibles and weave baskets, right? Like I've created a contingency plan for myself. So that's a part of this like mental resilience in the ecosystem that I've created in my own psychology. But in my day to day, while things are still as they are and we're not run by robots, I value efficiency, and so I will use it to crank out a spreadsheet or do some like, you know, formatting or something along those lines. But I value writing. I'm a writer and I'm a scientific illustrator. And so I will not outsource that work to an AI uh, to AI. So I think there's multiple scales that I would encourage people to look at, both like how, you know, in this like status quo world where you're living in right now, like how can you interact with it in a way that doesn't make you feel icky at the end of the day? And then also scale out and ask like, what are the tangible skills, the people based skills, the you know, nature land based skills that you can just be like slowly acquiring. Take a local class, you know, do something online, get a book, an identification book, and start like just creating that mental resilience. Because I think a lot of the AI conversation is very fear-based. And so the more that you can kind of shed that and question that and give yourself the tools to be resilient against that, I've found a lot of benefit there.
Thank you all so much. And I think we've come to the end of our time for this panel discussion, but just really want to thank all of our incredible panelists for sharing your stories, being so open, being so thoughtful in your answers to the questions, and to our attendees for asking some really great, thoughtful questions. It's been a lovely discussion to witness, and appreciate all of you spending the time. Want to invite everyone to join us for our next session, a career planning workshop with Jerry Taylor. That will start at 6 p.m. Eastern. So we have about a 15-minute break until then. But for now, we will close the Climate Careers panel, and thank you all so much for your time and participation.